Okay, the next question is about deep range of motion training. So is full range of motion training underrated or overrated for knee health? I'm going to say properly rated. I think it's properly rated. I think some people hype it up a lot. Some people say that it's not necessary and you never need to go full range because in sports you don't go through full knee flexion. But I think from a health standpoint, it's important. I saw a post from David Gray, who's a good physical therapist, and he was talking about mid-range for tendon health and full range for joint health. So one of the unique benefits of full range, other than the increased hypertrophy and having juicy quads, does matter for knee health. It really does. So you're going to get better hypertrophy gains from full range of motion training. But if I go all the way into knee flexion, you're maintaining that range, and you're also getting, in order to go into full knee flexion, I need tibial internal rotation. And these little internal rotations, and then as I extend, I'm getting more of the external rotation. This rotation of the knee is so important for knee health. So when it comes to getting your knees feeling better, this is something we attack in the durability code a lot. We do a lot of knee rotation stuff. And if you don't go through a joint's full range of motion, you probably will lose that ability over time. And that joint starts to get more stuck. And we can no longer get into deep knee flexion and fluid knee extension without going through those joint ranges. So we do like these CARs, controlled articular rotations, in the durability code. But then the best thing that I've done for this is like a cable. You put your foot through a strap and you start tibia externally rotated, and then you come into knee flexion. So it's just a hamstring curl. But as you go into knee flexion, you're internally rotating the tibia, and you go into full knee flexion. And this strengthens the areas like medial hamstring that's involved in that internal tibial rotation. And I'm telling you, a lot of knee pain can really clear up. Not all, but certain types of knee pain can really clear up from doing these exercises. And you got to maintain that tibial internal rotation for proper movement and sprinting. The moment the tibia gets stuck in external rotation, think about the backswing. So your foot just left the ground. You're coming into knee flexion. You should see the toe is not stuck out that entire time. The toe comes forward or even in, and the heel moves away. That's tibial internal rotation. I think a lot of people get that wrong. They think that comes from foot pressure on the ground. That actually comes from the ability to internally rotate the tibia, which is why you see somebody jump and they come into knee flexion, and you'll see that the toe goes in and the heel goes away. If they're coming in knee flexion, if somebody jumps and stays in knee extension, you'll still see the toe pointed out, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But like when you're sprinting, it is important to have the tibia be able to rotate as you come into knee flexion. And I say that rant to say that I do think that like some full range of motion squatting or some full range of motion leg press, like loading even with just moderate weights, I think is really important for maintaining that ability. Because like I said, in a deep squat, in order to get down to that bottom position, there's a lot of good, healthy rotation happening. And that's not always like in squatting with your foot on the ground. The tibia is not doing a lot of movement. The femur would actually be relatively externally rotating. And so that's what I mean is just this interaction between the tibia and the femur. There's rotation, slight rotations that happen there that is very important for knee health. And it flips closed chain versus open chain, right? So open chain, it would be the tibia moving. Closed chain is probably more of the femur externally rotating. But either way, it's this relative rotation that you need to maintain. And I think deep range of motion strength training is important. Now, people hear that and they're like, okay, I got to maximally load that. I think that gets pretty dangerous. I think a lot of the muscle tears that you see where people got to go get surgery is like deep range of motion squatting as heavy as possible, or heavy RDLs going as far as they possibly can. I think it's too dangerous. And I don't think there's a huge benefit. So I think you go light or you go a moderate weight and you go for reps when we're talking about the deep full range of motion training. I think once it's time for outputs, like let's lift heavy, let's get motor unit recruitment, I like mid-range. So I'm talking about thigh parallel during squatting, or even thigh just above parallel, 100 degrees, maybe all the way up to like 90 degrees. I like loading, if I'm doing more maximal loading, I like doing it with mid-range. Now, if you have patella tendon issues, everything changes. I don't recommend going full range off the bat, because as you go into a deep knee flexion, the patella will kind of push, or the patella tendon will stretch over that patella, and it gets a lot of compressive forces. That patella bone is pushing on it, and sometimes that just keeps aggravating it, so it never heals. So jumper's knee, even like Osgood Slaughter, like I would do more mid-range isometrics, like a 60-degree knee angle isometric hold for quad tendon, maybe up to like 90 degree. That's like the deepest I would go. But that full knee flexion with load, a lot of times that just pisses it off. Now, sometimes, eventually we have to trend towards that. That's part of rehab, is just like, okay, that's going to be part of my goal, is to get all the way down there pain-free. But early on in your rehab, I don't think that you should be messing with the full range. I think it sets a lot of people back. So typically, I think you're going to get your best tendon health gains from mid-range, and then I think you're going to get your best just joint range of motion gains from doing the full range with light to moderate weight. And of course, when it comes to strength and size, you could get it from mid-range or from deep range. Typically, the studies will show that deep range is a little bit better because it places the muscle on a better stretch. And even like there's newer studies on lengthened partials that are showing just as good of hypertrophy gains, muscle size gains, compared to just normal full range of motion training. So like you can get down to the bottom, heels elevated, full knee flexion, and kind of just pulse in that bottom position. That could be really beneficial for hypertrophy of the quads, hypertrophy of the glutes, adductor magnus, etc. So overall, I would say properly rated when it comes to deep range of motion training.